I've been pretty busy lately, so it was Wednesday before I even sat down to record this week's video. And I thought, what a better time than now to show you 3 real-time ideas for holiday cards you can make in a minute or two. Even better, change up the colors and themes, and these ideas will work at any time of year, whenever you need a card in a hurry. Let's start with what I would do if I only had a minute or two to make a card, and that's a simple die cut. First, I grabbed a 4¼ inch square card base from my drawer. It's already scored, so all I had to do was fold it and use my Teflon bone folder to burnish the fold. I like to burnish both sides so that the card will lay flat to make it easier to work with and also for its photo session later. Next, I flipped through my die cuts that I've stored in plastic envelopes from scrapbook.com. I selected an oversized joy sentiment from Waffle flower. You can see I have quite a few of them cut already. I've tried to make it a habit to cut some extra word dies each time I'm die cutting for a card, to build up some extras for keeping on hand for any time I'm making a card, but especially when I need to make one really quickly. This joy word comes with a shadow, and I am going to use it because it'll make the sentiment bigger on my card, and also it'll allow me to add some color. If your word die doesn't have a shadow, just add some color to the white word for a similar look. So now I have the white shadow and the white word. Since my card base is white, I'll add color to the shadow and leave the word white. I'm adding color by grabbing my red ink and pressing it right onto the shadow die cut. I do this on a pad of recycled newsprint because it's absorbent and therefore it'll limit the mess I'll have to clean up later. This works well with any large Christmas word die, but any simple shape die that's clearly Christmas would also work. Think snowflakes or Christmas trees or poinsettias, things like that. Next, I added some glue to the back of the shadow to glue it directly to the card base. The red ink is still a little wet, so I'm being careful to keep my hands clean. Now it's time for the word itself. I pop out any of the letter centers that are still in the die cut, and then I add tiny drops of Barely Art liquid glue along the back of it before flipping it over and pressing it down onto the red shadow. I'm sure you've noticed that I don't have the white dot for the J here, and I've got a couple of quick options to finish the card. I could cut off the dot portion of the shadow. I've done that before. Or I could cut the dot out with the die, but I'm going to grab a gold gem from my drawer of embellishments to fill in as the dot. I've got lots of colors and I could spend some time trying to find the perfect match, but basic gold goes with everything. And even better, this enchanted forest color from Crafty Meraki flashes with iridescent pinks and greens for a festive finishing touch. Adding a lot of gems is not really a fast thing to do, but for just one, I use a small dab of the liquid glue and a jewel picker to place the gold gem in place, and now I'm done. Red and white is a classic Christmas color combination, so think about how your choice of color can add to the occasion when you're trying to move fast. Now here's some suggestions if you've got a bit more time. You could cut the shadow from patterned paper or colored cardstock or specialty cardstock. You could doodle a frame with a black or even a gold pen. You could pop up the die cut. You could blend some ink on the outside edge of the die cut to add some dimension or a glow. You could use an embossing folder on the shadow, or add a panel that's been embossed. You could stamp a sentiment on the inside. You could add the die cut to a smaller panel and add a contrasting mat to add definition to your card. You could stencil a pattern or use pattern paper for the smaller panel. You could stamp sending or to the world either directly on the card or onto a sentiment strip to add to the card. You could decorate the envelope. Or you could do any combination of all these ideas. And just a note that a 4¼ inch square card fits into an A2 size envelope, so there's no extra postage required. If you want to make a bigger square, you could try making a 5-inch square card and mail it in a standard 5x7-inch envelope, which I understand also does not require extra postage in the US, although it's probably best to check with the post office. I'm sure you noticed that it was quick for me to make that die cut card because I have leftovers ready and waiting to go, and maybe you don't, so maybe stamping is a better idea for you. Again, I'm starting with a pre-cut, scored card base, folded and burnished so it will lie flat. This one's A2 sized, and I'm placing it into the corner of my MISTI. I've got a sticky mat, but it doesn't hurt to have the magnets help to hold it down. This big stamp set from Colorado Craft Company is a great one for this. It's made up of all sorts of different bits and pieces so that you can customize your message. I'm using We Wish You a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I love that this is going to take up the whole front of my card and really nothing else is needed. To be truly, truly fast, I would stamp the whole sentiment in red ink and be done. But it really doesn't take that much longer to remove the Merry word from the misty door and then ink up the rest of the sentiment in black ink before closing the door and stamping it down. Then I just place the Merry word onto the card, remove the rest of the sentiment from the misty door, don't even clean it right now if you don't have time, and then grab some red ink to stamp the Merry, and you've got a clean, simple, but still festive card. And I'm going to do one little thing more, and that is to add darker red ink just along the bottom edge of the Merry word. This will add visual interest, and of course it's optional if you don't have time. A stamp positioner is a pretty essential tool for this card because of all the restamping, but as long as your inks are juicy, you can do it with acrylic blocks instead, probably without that second color of red. Another quick way to add an embellishment is to add some gold watercolor splatter. I grabbed my splatter box and my Ultra metallic watercolors, along with an aqua brush that has the water right in it. I still sprayed some water into the pan because it gets more water down faster, and you need quite a bit of liquid to get the right consistency for splattering. You may be thinking that this isn't a very quick technique, but I think the all-over sparkle is so pretty, and honestly, because the splatters are so small, it really doesn't take that long to dry. And of course, you can leave it out if you're out of time. If you've got a bit more time, again, you can doodle or dot a frame if you want. I would choose a black pen with a line width that matches that stamping. You can add a sentiment on the inside of the card. You could add some gems. You could add some additional stamping. Some little stars or snowflakes or Christmas trees would be a perfect addition. This stamp set has a matching die with two shadows that you can use to cut out and pop up the Merry word with all the options we talked about before: pattern paper, specialty cardstock, whatever you want. You can trim this down to a panel and add a mat. You could heat emboss all of the stamping. You could even do it all in white on dark or ink blended cardstock. And again, you could decorate the envelope. The bonus of this card is that it's a great one for easily making multiples. Check this out. This original size Misty is sized so that it can fit 2 card panels on their sides. On the bottom one, I put down a piece of acetate so I could place the stamps I want to stamp in black. Remember, I didn't clean them from the 2-minute card, so the acetate will protect the cardstock from smudges. Once I have the stamps in place, I can stamp the first one with the black ink, then move that panel up to the top position. Then I put down some more acetate, and now I can place the Merry in the right spot. Now my Misty can stamp 2 cards at a time, so you can make as many as you want at twice the speed. Now here's some of the things about my craft room that make it easy for me to get to work so quickly. You can think about whether any of them would work for you, especially at this busy card making time of year. First, I have a stack of pre-cut, pre-scored card bases in my 2 favorite sizes. I have a box of extra die-cut words. I have color-coded stamp storage. I can tell at a glance where my Christmas stamps are because they're marked with a red stripe at the top. This is a cheap, easy hack that helps me stay organized. My craft space is pretty organized, and I know where all my tools are. I know where my stamps are, I know where my inks are, and I know where all my most common used tools are. Finally, my Misty. A stamp positioner is a real time saver and card saver whenever you're trying to work quickly or make multiples. Ink blending and stenciling is not always considered a quick technique, and you may need to practice, but the results can still be stunning and quick. Again, I'm starting with a card base, folding it along the score line and burnishing both sides so it'll lie flat. You can work on your favorite surface. I'm using a sticky mat here. It'll hold the back of the card in place, and I could put a loop of low-tack tape inside to hold it closed. And just like the die cut, I chose a stencil that is clearly Christmassy, a big snowflake. This means if I'm out of time, I don't have to add a sentiment. I'm positioning the stencil so that it completely covers the card, and that will also help keep it shut. This means no extra masking, although I did use some mint tape to hold it in place. Then I just started blending my red ink through. One of the great things about blending with these Catherine Pooler inks is that the more you go over it, the darker it will get. So even though I'm working with only one color, I can get different values, which will add visual interest and dimension. And I'm still thinking that splatter is the fastest way to add sparkle to the card, but I'll choose a different color this time so you can see the true time it took for this simple card. This time I'm using one of my little Yuli watercolors, which are incredibly sparkly. The only downside to them is that I do find that the sparkle can come off on your hands when it's dried on the card, so if that's a concern for you, be sure to double check before you buy them. So if you've got some more time, you could stamp a sentiment on the front of the card. You could stamp a sentiment on the inside of the card. You could use 2 or more colors for your ink blending, and you could use gems instead of splatter. And you could doodle right on the snowflake, maybe add some white highlights with a gel pen. But be sure you have a plan, or it could take a lot of time. You might even end up not liking it, but being stuck because you're out of time. Like the other cards, you could trim down the panel and add a contrasting mat. You could heat emboss a sentiment. You could add a die cut sentiment. You could blend ink around the outside edge of the card. You could emboss the panel, or you could cut it with a die with fancy edges. Or you could combine any of these ideas. For a completely different look, you could build all these cards on craft card bases. This is a classic rustic look that works really well at Christmas. What are your quick tricks when you're in a rush? Let me know in the comments below. I've got a free printable that has lots of tips for quick cards, as well as ideas for what to have in a quick card making kit. I've put the link down below in the video description so you can download it and print it if you want. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.